Good evening. We got a lot of people standing, so while you can, why don't you grab a seat? There's some over here for those that just came in. Nick from Duffy Rolls, thanks for being here. One of my favorite people that comes to the Opportunity Coalition. If you haven't had Duffy Rolls, recommend it highly. So go ahead and grab a seat. Before we get started, I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. My guess is you had an option of where you could be this evening, and you chose to be with us. And for that, we are truly grateful. I also want to thank the Innovation Pavilion. We have Media there in the back. Is Vic here tonight? Okay. And then we also have Carrie Ann. Is she around?
No, they're traveling.
Okay. Great. There we go. So for those that aren't familiar with the Innovation Pavilion, I think it's important that we highlight them. I bought this building because I believed in the Innovation Pavilion so much. And the Innovation Pavilion is an incubator for entrepreneurs. The youngest entrepreneur is in middle school, the oldest is in his 80s, and everything in between. Over 80 new companies have been founded and are being grown here. And you think about the ripple effect throughout Denver, it's very, very exciting. And they let us use this space, and for that we're grateful. Even though I own the building, I guess I could use the space anyway. But I'm still grateful. I just want to make sure you know I'm grateful. Okay, good. Check, I got that done. Please report back to Vic. Brian is grateful. I also want to thank Ashley Juge for setting up all the food and drink. Without that, you wouldn't have any this evening. Michael Collins with B-Story Driven for doing all of the video. I want to thank Millie Kitchen, back there Millie, for checking people in, and Christina Whalen. And I also want to thank our advisory board. We are blessed with a phenomenal advisory board at the Opportunity Coalition. We have Nicole Gamp with us this evening. Nicole. We have Kyle Henderson with Excel Companies. Kyle. Christina Whalen, who I just mentioned with the Denver Mortgage Source, and John Brackney with Webolutions. Did I miss any of the advisory board members? Let's give them a round of applause. So oftentimes people ask, why did you found the Opportunity Coalition? And it's so exciting each night that we come here once a month, and so many people are new to the Opportunity Coalition. I'd love for you to tell me how you heard about us, or if anybody twisted your arm in getting here. But it's exciting to see the growth. And I founded the organization because I noticed that people throughout our state were somewhat disconnected. There were people from the Western Slope, the Mountain Region, Front Range, and Eastern Plains. There were people in academia, people in politics, people in the media, people in business. But there weren't a lot of bridges connecting these people together. A lot of organizations you go to on a given evening, they want something from you. They make an ask. But we here, all we want to do is to promote great relationships, to promote sparks of connection between people, to promote free enterprise. And we believe that by doing so, people are going to find jobs, new businesses and new initiatives are going to be created that can help transform society, and that a better dialogue will occur instead of one that is contentious. So thank you for being here, and please spread the word with your friends, because we want to grow out of this space and maybe, go into other venues. 335 billion. 335 billion. Does anyone know what that number may stand for? Anyone want to guess? Come on, don't be a shy crowd here tonight. Yes?
The amount of medical supplies moved.
Ooh, that's pretty good. Given our speaker, I see you're dialed in on that. I like it. It's not the answer, but I like it. 335 billion. Another? Yes?
It's about what we spend, what the U.S. spends every year defending our position in oil-producing countries.
That's a good answer. Good answer. It may be, I don't know, but it is a good answer. I like it. Anyone else?
Hamburgers sold at McDonald's.
It's probably true. 335.17 billion is the total private annual giving from individuals, foundations, and businesses in the United States of America. $335 billion per year. Giving USA estimates that giving by individuals accounted for $229 billion of this amount on a yearly basis, which is about 72% of all contributions. Foundations make up about 15%, bequests about 7%, and corporations about 6%. So giving in America is being handled by people like you, people who care, people that are trying to make a positive difference in the world. 25% of US adults volunteered for an organization in some capacity last year. That may seem high or low to you, but that equaled 8.1 billion hours of work. 8.1 billion, which equates on estimates, depending on what hourly wage you want to ascribe to those individuals, of $160 billion in value. 160 billion. I did some research on the rates of giving in the United States. People who make below $100,000, on average, are giving about 3.6% of their annual salary in some capacity. People who make $100,000 to $200,000, it dips down to 2.6%. Above $200,000, it's 3.1%. And for most of you in the room that I know this next stat will apply to, if you're making over 10 million a year, don't raise your hand, you may be just accosted by everybody else in the room. But above 10 million, they're giving almost 6% of their annual income to charitable causes. So I did a little more research. I said, where does Colorado line up? I think we're a pretty giving state. Colorado, sadly, is the lowest giving state in the mountain region. I didn't know that. We give on average about 2.73% of our income, and we're 31st of the 50 states in overall giving. Colorado brings in about $3.14 billion a year to giving, and about $1.87 billion comes from the Denver metro area alone. After a slight drop after the Great Recession, individual giving has been increasing on a yearly basis. But the pre-recession high of 2005 has not been met yet. 24% of annual giving is done between Thanksgiving and New Year's. So I told you a little bit about the giving. Let's talk a moment about the need. There's about 1.5 million tax-exempt nonprofit organizations in the United States of America. 992,000 of these are public charities, 98,000 are foundations, and 365,000 are considered an other category. Nonprofits account for about 9% of the wages and salaries paid in the U.S., and their share of our GDP is about 5.3%. The assets of public charities is about $3 trillion in America. So why do I share all this with you? It's not to bore you with stats, but to drive home the point that there's a great need out there. We all know there's a need, and there's many organizations trying to serve different needs. And the good news is that there are groups out there trying to make that impact. But tonight, we are blessed and fortunate to have one of the greatest of these nonprofits in our midst. It's an organization that's just down the street. Many of you probably know about Project C.U.R.E, but they're making a phenomenal impact on a global scale. Project C.U.R.E sends out about 3 semi-loads of donated medical supplies and equipment each week. Since 1987, they've served 130 countries. 130 countries. They're consistently recognized with the highest 4-star ranking from Charity Navigator, and was named by Forbes as one of the top 200 charities in America. A little organization just down the street that was founded right here. They send teams of medical professionals and supplies through their C.U.R.E kits. They have 15,000 volunteers per year, going back to that 25% number, making one of the most efficient and effective grassroots organizations in the country. We were just having a meeting with Doug Jackson before this event got started. And Jonathan said, it's a place where miracles happen on a regular basis. A place where miracles happen on a regular basis. Jonathan, I know you're an author, so hopefully that wasn't plagiarism on my behalf that I gave you that quote. Okay, I just want to make sure. I was listening to you, though. I just want to let you know. So as you all know, we have Doug Jackson with us tonight. I'd like to read his bio. I usually like just to give a summary, but Doug is so involved in so many amazing things, I think it's important that you get to hear it firsthand. He is a Rotary International Paul Harris Fellow and was the president of the Denver Rotary Club, number 31. He serves on the board of directors of Interaction, World Denver, the Nanda Center for International and Comparative Law at the University of Denver, and the Ruckert Hartman College for Health Professionals at Regis University. He is a member of the National Who's Who Registry and a graduate of the leadership program LEAD San Diego. Past service includes the Institute for International Education, which administers Fulbright scholarships, Leaders Challenge, and a ruling elder of Cherry Hills Community Church. Doug received the Lifetime Achievement Award in Healthcare from the American Red Cross, the Civis Princeps recognition from Regis University. Probably didn't say that correctly, but you'll forgive me. We're friends. The 5280 Magazine Philanthropist of the Year, and accepted the CoBiz Best Places to Work and Colorado Ethics in Business Award on behalf of the team Project C.U.R.E. Doug graduated magna cum laude from Northwest Nazarene University in 1982, receiving a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration. In 1985, he earned a Juris Doctor from the University of Colorado at Boulder, receiving the American Jurisprudence Award for Excellence in the Study of Law. In 1992, he was awarded a PhD in Business Administration with an emphasis in finance and economic metrics. There we go, I kind of butchered that. From the University of Colorado at Boulder. Following his admission to the bar, Doug administered the legal affairs for the international agricultural firm of CTB Incorporated, a Berkshire Hathaway corporation. Upon the completion of his PhD, Doug opened the Freeman Business Center at Point Loma University in San Diego. As executive director, Doug developed and implemented numerous programs and seminars to advance business opportunities for college students and business professionals in the San Diego community and abroad. I give you this background because Doug is different than many. He has business experience and has a lot of interesting background. But one of the biggest things that I love about Doug, and I think that you're going to hear from him this evening, is his heart. He has a phenomenal heart that's impacting many, many lives for the better. With that, help me welcome Doug to the front.
Anywhere you are is where I want to be, my friend. It's just fun rubbing shoulders with successful people. If you haven't done that yet, just lean over to the person next to you. Kind of just... Back when I was a kid, they called it overactive. Now they just call it ADD, but I cannot stand behind a podium, so I hope that's okay with you guys. It's great to see you tonight. I have a question for you. What are you willing to trade your life for? What are you willing to trade your life for? That's a question that usually bothers most of us when we ask it, because we don't like to think about what that really means, right? I traded my life for something. That, by the way, sounded like a eulogy, didn't it? Thank you. Makes my mom proud, but that's... What are you willing to trade your life for? My dad answered that question with the word money. My dad was a little kid in a town called Nampa, Idaho, outside of Boise. My grandfather, his dad, was a preacher and didn't have any money. My mom's dad was a rancher, and he didn't have any money. And my folks decided that they wanted to change the course of their life, so my dad decided that by the time he was 30, he was going to be a millionaire. And he was going to trade his life for making money. And so he moved from Boise, Idaho to Denver, Colorado. At the time, there was not even $1 million in the entire state of Boise, Idaho. But he thought it was here, and so he moved down here and he started something called the Denver Auto Mart. And my brother and I, we grew up underneath Ferraris and Corvairs and Corvettes and all the really fun, cool, fast stuff, because that's what my dad liked. And somebody told him one day, they said, if you can sell fast cars, you could probably sell real estate. And so my dad got into business with the lieutenant governor at the time here in Colorado in a little place called Hideaway Park up US 40. It was such a small town at the time that they didn't even have a post office. And so my dad and my uncle had to physically build the post office. And it was a tiny little thing that would probably fit right in here. It had metal combination boxes to put your mail in there because they didn't need a postmaster. They just needed a zip code. And you can't get a zip code if you don't have a post office. And they built a post office. And they went on down the road and they called that area where they were developing Winter Park. And so if you go up there now, where the Safeway store is, that was our snowmobile run. And all of that dirt from there all the way to Bob Vance's property up there at Devil's Thumb, that was ours. And there was nothing up there. And it was a really cool place to be as a kid. Because there was the wolves and the coyotes, and they would come chase the rabbits at night, and you could hear them. And when the sun would set, it set purple across the snow. It was just gorgeous. And my dad started making money. He started buying another part of the mountains up there for about $125 an acre, and we call that area Lion's Head. Just a bunch of Basque shepherds out there in the fields, you know, with this little tiny 2-lane road winding through there along the creek. He failed in his mission to be a millionaire by the time he was 30. He did it when he was 31. And then he did it again, and again, and again, and again. And he discovered something kind of interesting. He discovered the truth that you can be rich and not happy. Steve Covey talked about this when he said, I spent my life climbing a ladder just to realize that the ladder was leaning against the wrong wall. And that's what happened with my folks. It wasn't that the money was bad, it still bought cool stuff, but it complicated things. You weren't sure if the people who were coming to your house for Christmas and the big party were there because they really liked you or just because they wanted to hang out at your house because you're rich. You weren't really sure if the guy wanted to really go to lunch with you or he just wanted to ride in your new Mercedes. And so my folks just decided that since life was easier when they were poor kids in Idaho, they'd just give the money away. And they sat my brother and I down and they said, boys, we started a foundation and that means that we just gave away your inheritance and we're not paying for your college either. And when you're in high school, who cares? When you go to college, you did what? Maybe there's no check coming. Are you kidding me? But that's what happened. And my dad started doing economic consulting. They'd given all their money away. They built that big Nazarene church out there on Hamden. They just built the church, gave it to those people. They did some other projects around and they gave that stuff away too. And he discovered that you can be really, really happy without having to own all this stuff. It was amazing. And then he got to thinking about what else do I own? Not only do I own the keys, not only do I own the bank box, not only do I own the checkbook, I own what goes on in my head that taught me how to get that stuff to start with. And I can give that stuff away too. We call that mentorship, don't we? So he started doing economic consulting. He first went to Zimbabwe, and then he went to Ecuador and Peru and landed in Brazil. And his interpreter was a medical student, and she took him to this clinic in the middle of a favela, outside of Rio with about 350,000 people in it and no health care. And my dad looked at this doctor and he said, I don't understand. All you've got in here is an old metal exam table and a box of re-rolled bandages. I'm a real estate developer. I'm not a doctor. How do you do medicine like this? And the doctor looked at my dad and he said, well, 3,000% inflation. You're the economista. What am I supposed to do? I can't get stuff bought. My dad came back to Denver and he had a buddy of his that was in the medical wholesale company, and he told Greg this story. And Greg said, well, if you'll come on down to my shop, he said, I'll give you stuff. And Greg went through his warehouse and he gave my dad $50,000 of medical supplies just right off the shelf. My dad had a big Dodge truck. My brother and I, we used to take the exhaust pipes off and drive it through Evergreen just because that's what you do when you race through Evergreen. Hey, hillbilly kids. I don't think I had shoes till I went to college. He took that Dodge truck and he went down and he collected all that stuff out of Greg's warehouse and he put it in his garage. And while he's driving back up 285 to go up there to Evergreen, Greg's on the phone calling his buddies and saying, hey, I just gave to this crazy guy, Jim Jackson. He's going to Brazil with all this stuff. What kind of junk do you have in your warehouse you can give this guy? And in about 30 days, my folks had put $250,000 worth of stuff in their garage. And Mom and Dad paid to ship that first container down. Now, a lot of times I say that, and people will come up afterwards and they say, so Doug, I'm interested in one of those container things you got. How many of those could I put in the back of my Suburban? A container's a semi-truck trailer. You can put 2.5 Suburbans in it, right? It's 40 feet long, 8 feet wide, 8 feet tall. Put 800 boxes of stuff in there. The average value of what we put in a container now is $450,000. My parents paid to ship that down to Brazil, and that's how this whole crazy thing got started. Then you got another call, and another call, and another call. And I was off doing my own thing. I got my PhD. I want to go to Wall Street. Took a little detour. My give back was going to be to teach college in a place called San Diego, which is not charity, friends. I'm just telling you. I would have paid to take that job. That was a good job. But I told my pop that I would help him, and we got a grant for 6 months, $75,000 to hire my buddy Dave, my friend Doreen, and me. And we were going to come help my dad. And then I was out of here. 18 years have gone by now that I've been running this thing. And they tell us now when I go back to Washington, D.C., that we're the biggest in the world doing what we do. Nobody's moving more medical supplies and equipment than Project C.U.R.E. And that's crazy to me. That's crazy to me because we're only touching the market in Denver, Phoenix, Nashville, Houston, and Chicago. We don't even have a warehouse in Boston. We don't have one in Minneapolis. We don't have one in Los Angeles. We need one in Dallas. Do you know there's 86 hospitals in the hospital consortium in Dallas, Texas? 86. Do you know how many are in Denver? Anybody? 24. That's how much bigger the healthcare market is in Dallas, and we're not there. Our average client makes $1 a day and they're going to work 12 hours to get it. That means that they cannot afford health care. And that means that the alternative usually is they just don't make it. We've done a lot of work lately in West Africa, and you all know what happened with Ebola and all of that stuff. We've done a ton of work over there. I was in a little town called Kenema, and it was up on the Sierra Leone border up there with Liberia and Guinea. We do a needs assessment before we ever ship, and that's one of those things that my dad started. And this is one of those truths of life that we know, by the way, just take a little detour, but we don't like to put this into practice. The truth of life is that your greatest strength becomes your weakness, and your greatest weakness can become your strength. You remember my dad was a real estate developer? Do you know what he didn't know anything about was healthcare? The audacity of deciding to do something with global healthcare when you don't know even what you're doing. Your greatest weakness becomes your greatest strength. We don't like doing that in our lives, do we? I don't want to admit when I'm weak. But the funny thing is when you admit it, it opens the door to a lot of really cool stuff. So my dad would go over there and he would sit down with these doctors and nurses and say, tell me, Doc, what is it you do at this hospital? Now, he had to do that because he really, truly didn't know. And he would tell that doctor, just say it really, really slow, because I'm going to have to write this down. I'm a developer, I got a kid who's a lawyer, things are bad for us. That little piece of weakness has become the central thread to the fabric of Project C.U.R.E. We do not still ship anything anywhere until one of us has gone and done a needs assessment. And we're testing the 3 C's. We're testing character. Do I really trust these people? I'm coming at you in a community where everybody works 12 hours a day and makes $1 a day, and I'm going to give you $500,000 worth of stuff. If I don't trust you, I'm going to make a thief out of you. That's what happens. So I really want to know who I'm working with, right? This business that I can do my entire life on Skype is a bunch of crap. Doesn't work. The only thing that counts is sitting across the table from somebody, drink a little bit of tequila. I like that one. In Mongolia, it's just straight vodka. Or really, really bad horse milk. Take the vodka. You learn things about people when you connect with them face to face. So the first thing I want to know is character. I want to know capacity. If I send you an X-ray machine, can you plug it in? Is there a radiologist here that can fix it? Can you get the cassettes and the film? Can you develop this stuff? Does your electricity here even work? If we put this thing in the ceiling, is it going to pull your roof down? Wouldn't that be nice to know before we spend all that time in the United States collecting it, raising money, and shipping it, only to find out that it's the best goat barn that those people ever had? And that's what happens. Character, capacity, the third thing is customs. Can you actually get it in? Can these people get this through customs without getting it stolen? We want to know those 3 things before we ever ship. So we do these needs assessments. We were up in the north part in Kenema in Sierra Leone, and we were in this hospital. The doctor in that hospital had asked me for 8 hospital beds with side rails. Well, I made a note of that, and we went and we did that needs assessment. It takes about 2 hours, and at the end of the 2-hour time I say, so let's just walk through the hospital. I got a really nice Nikon camera, and I'm going to take pictures of every inch of this hospital because I don't want to forget what I just saw. And I want everybody else in the United States to be able to look at my pictures and see what else we saw together, and we will do a better job of serving your needs if I can take pictures. And they say, sure. They always say, sure. We walked into a room that was probably as big as this room, and it was just full of beds. Bed, 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 bed. No private rooms. I've been in places like in Rwanda where they have 2 and 3 people in a single bed. Unbelievable. I looked at the doctor and I said, hey doc, where's your plugins? He said, for what? I said, well, in my country, you ask for beds with side rails. Beds with side rails are electric. If you want manual beds like the ones you got, I can get those for you too, but those come out of an old folks home and they're not going to have side rails. He said to me, he said, well, they're not really for this room here. And I said, where are they for? He said, they're for labor and delivery. I said, okay. Like for mom when she comes in to have a baby, or after she had the baby, put her in the room? He said, no. He said, we have a problem with eclampsia. I said, well, let's go see that. So we walked down the hallway, and he's telling me that these moms never come in to get prenatal checkups. And the reason they don't is because going to the hospital is where everybody dies. So there's no way in heck you're going to go to the hospital. And they wait until they're 36, 48 hours in obstructed labor and they're bleeding to death, and finally somebody puts them in a white pickup and they drive them down the road, no ambulance. And they show up at the hospital and baby's already gone and mom dies, and we just repeated the cycle again. Well, we're talking about this, and he tells me about this fully eclamptic state that looks a lot like an epileptic seizure. And we walk through the swinging doors, and there's a woman from me to you, James, and she's in the bed and she's in full eclamptic shock. It looks like she's in an epileptic seizure, and she dies of a heart attack right there. And I looked at the doctor and I said, so explain to me how a hospital bed with side rails fixes that problem. And he said, well, we don't have anesthesia, and we don't have an operating theater that functions here. And so what we do is we tie her arms and legs to the side rails, and we try to do a cesarean section before she wakes up. This was not like 1864 in the Civil War. This was about a year ago in Sierra Leone. And here's the really tough thing. All those doctors and nurses that I met at that hospital in Kenema are gone today because of Ebola. They're gone. They died. And the story is not being told yet as to what happens 18 months from now when the next mom goes in to deliver that baby and there's no doctors. And all the beds are contaminated. And the operating theater that didn't exist then, guess what? We just perpetuate this cycle. It's 2015. It's time that we say, stop. Let's fix that. And the really insane thing about that whole story is the stuff that's needed to take care of those moms and those kids and those dads that fall off the back of motorcycles and get cut with machete knives and all the stuff that happens. All of the things that are needed to fix those people are in such abundance in the United States that we throw them in the garbage. It's absolutely insane. Wow. So what do you trade your life for? Do you really want to trade your life for another Mercedes? My dad said no. I said no. We got 17,000 volunteers in the United States who stand up every year and they say no. That's not okay with us either. And we've learned a few things along the way when we're going through all of this process of building this organization. We had 12 volunteers when I started. And we learned a few things. And one of the things that I learned that I want to share with you tonight is that people don't work for money, they work for passion and purpose. If you read the book Daniel Pink wrote called Drive, you know this. Daniel Pink was talking about it theoretically, and he's absolutely right. I can tell you on a day-to-day basis as somebody who shows up at the office and there's no place to park in my parking lot because the volunteers are there, that's my best day. This works. This works. We have somehow bought into this notion in the United States that I can make you dance if I hold $10,000 above your head. And it doesn't work that way. I love talking to college students about this. Say, hey, you want a raise? Kids like, yeah, it's $10,000. Wow. Here's what I didn't tell you. We're in the hotel service industry, and so that $10,000 raise is going to mean that you never see another New Year's Eve or Christmas Eve again in your life because you're working for me. And it also means that you get 2 weeks of vacation, but not consecutively because we can't afford to have you gone. And oh, by the way, you're moving to Detroit, Michigan. You still want the 10 grand? Every one of these kids says, heck no, I'm not doing that. I say, wait a minute. I thought we lived in a capitalistic society where money is the motivator, and this is what we want to do, is we want to get a bigger house, a better car, whatever. Wow, you're telling me now that this doesn't work? I want to put a caveat in here for a second. I was given this lecture at University of Denver in one of their big symposiums. And one of Denver's most wealthy guys was sitting there, and about this point he stood up and walked out. The 4 agreements, don't take it personally. I'm the world's biggest capitalist. And the only reason I get to talk about this is because our system works. We get the alternative to say, you know what? I made the money, I'm going to give it away now. I get to do whatever the heck I want to do with my life. This is the coolest thing in the world, and I'm going to come back to this in a minute. So it's not that I'm opposed to these kids coming out of school and deciding to make money. It's just that somebody's got to tell us that that's not where the happiness is. That's the byproduct that happens when you're really good at the game. But that's not the game. Because it's not going to make you happy. I've got a daughter, her name's Caroline. I've got 3 kids actually, 17, 14, and 12. And they're all girls, and that means that there is so much estrogen. They're great kids. My 12-year-old Caroline, she thinks she's poor. She lives with her mom in Columbine Country Club. She is not poor, but she thinks she is. So Caroline loves $20 bills. And if I tell her you need to clean the glass in my loft, she's pretty happy to do it for 20 bucks. And that first $20 makes her so happy. When I was going to school with Dr. McNown here, we called that the marginal rate of satiation or something like that, right? This is my econometrics professor, by the way. I haven't seen him forever. So it's good to see you. The marginal rate of satiation simply means that your first bite of pizza always tastes better than your last. It means that the first little bit, if we could plot Caroline's happiness on a vertical scale and $20 bills on a horizontal scale, that first $20 makes her almost infinitely happy. That little happiness line goes right straight up. The next $20 doesn't make her quite as happy. And by the time you get over here and you're Donald Trump, you won't even get out of the limousine to pick up the $20 bill laying in front of Trump Tower. It's just not worth your time. And our little happiness curve goes like this, right? And here's the interesting thing that Daniel Pink talked about, was that the curve flattens out a lot faster than we think it does. We get happy really quick, and then we get bored. My coach calls it the new normal. We buy a pair of shoes, and that first day they feel great. There are blisters on your feet, but they feel really, really great. You buy the car, it smells wonderful. Tell your kid it smells a hamburger in a bag. But still, it smells pretty good, right? And for the first couple of months, it's still your new car. 6 months later, it's your car. 2 years later, it's your old car. And 5 years later, you can't wait to get rid of the pile of junk, right? The car didn't change. You changed. I changed. We hit that factor that said that people don't work for money, we work for passion and purpose. What is it that makes you the most happy? It's probably those times when you interact with somebody else. It's probably that time when you really figure out what your talent is and you start exercising your talents. If you are in an organization today and you're working hard and you hate your job, quit. I had somebody tell me, don't go around America telling people that, especially in front of their boss. And I had a boss who came and said, could you tell like half my employees that? Because I'm tired of managing people who really don't want to be here. Some really cool things happen when we figure that out. Around my shop, I call it the 3 A's, right? I'm going to hire on ability. That's the first A. We all do that. Can you really do this job? I'm going to hire on attitude. I want you to come to work and be happy. Don't come around here thinking that you don't want to be here. Then I want to hire on alignment. I want to make sure your values are the same as my values. If I really believe that you're here for passion, and I got 17,000 people who show up for passion because I'm not paying them with cash, then guess what I get to do? I get to trust you. Because I know why you're here. I know what your motivation is. If I'm making you dance for 10 grand, I'm worried about the guy who's got 11. Because they will buy you for that much cheaper. And I never really, truly trust you. Something else changes. If you're the boss of an organization and you haven't coupled passion and purpose with what you have your team doing, start now. Go home and figure this out. You will become the chief storytelling officer of your organization. That's what I get to do. I go to places and I see stuff and I come back and I tell them stories. We bring people in, like the Minister of Health from Kenya, and I say, hey, can you tell my volunteers that story about how mom always has to bring her own gloves to the hospital, and if she doesn't, that you deliver babies in plastic bags? Can you tell them that story? Because that story counts. It counts for me. And if we got people working in the warehouse, which is not heated, by the way, and I do not air condition the Houston warehouse, and we load the warehouses in the summer in Phoenix, Arizona at 3 o'clock in the morning because it's too dang hot to load them after about 7, Those folks want to get paid in something, and that something is passion and purpose. They want to know what they're doing counts. And if you're the boss, that's your job. You got to tell them why. Simon Sinek talks about that, right? Start with why. You got to tell them why you're doing this. And if you're having trouble with motivation around the shop, and we haven't figured out why we're doing this stuff, I'd start there. And start looking at that and start saying, what is it about the thing that I'm willing to trade my life for that has to do with passion and purpose? Sometimes we're afraid of doing that. We're afraid of doing it because maybe you won't buy the passion and purpose, and somehow that's a vote against me. It's not. We're all created completely different. The thing that gets you all charged up in the morning is probably something completely different than the thing that gets me charged up. There's people in this town that you and I know that just love the game. Phil Anschutz does not need another dollar. But he's going to go get up in the morning and work one of his 189 companies that he owns because he loves doing what he does. He just likes it. Judge David Ebell is the best justice on the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals because he loves law. I would hate to have him working for me at Project C.U.R.E. He would be miserable, and so would I. The thing that gets him cranked up is not the same thing that gets me cranked up. The thing that gets my kids cranked up, I can tell you, Caitlin is different than Kendall, and Kendall is different than Caroline. You're different than me, and that's okay. The one thing we do have in common, though, is this notion that by the time we get to the end of this whole deal, and we look back at the trade that we just made with 410 or whatever it's going to be, we want to know that it mattered. That what we did counted for something. That we were able to take a little piece of our life and we were able to change the world with that piece. And it could be whatever you get to pick. I got to thinking about this the other day. And I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if for one time in the history of the world, in one place on this whole globe, if we had one nation that had the opportunity to say, I get to do whatever I want to do. I told you my grandfather was a rancher. You know why? Because his dad was a rancher. And when Grandpa died, he gave the farm to my Uncle Roger. If you were in France today, when you're in the 8th grade, they send you to a test. And that test will determine when you're in 8th. I told you, I was raised a hillbilly kid. I didn't even go to school in the 8th grade. I hated school. When you're in the 8th grade, they tell you whether you're going to go off to be technical or you're going to go to the university. And that sets the course of history for your whole life. If you're in North Korea, the short little guy tells you to pick rice. Not because you like rice. Because he decided that for you. We live in an amazing time in an amazing country. This is why I told you I'm an unabashed capitalist. You get to pick whatever makes you happy. And if you're really good at it, you can make a living doing that. If you really love what you do, you will be the best there is at doing it. And if you hate what you do, you will never be any good, ever. What if we had a whole country, in the first time in the history of humanity ever on the planet Earth, where an entire nation said, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do the passion and purpose thing. I want to do what I want to do because I'm going to be the best there is at that, whether that's Tiger Woods playing golf, Yo-Yo Ma playing the cello, Dodge designing 700 horsepower cars, whatever it is, Steve Jobs who says, hey, I got a crazy, stupid idea. Let's take your entire record collection and put it on your telephone. Really? Oh, and by the way, the phone has to have rounded edges because I said so. Wow. I think that could be the greatest revolution ever. I think we could solve international healthcare problems. I think we could solve some poverty issues. I think we could solve some water issues. I think if we really took that approach and the people who really loved education wanted to be teachers, we'd probably solve our education problems. If those scientists really did what they loved and we got out of their way and let them do it, unbelievable. We would have the best music and the best houses and the best cars and the best clothes and the best relationships and the best opportunities ever, because that's what matters. And that's what you and I get to do. That's what you and I get to do. Never underestimate the power of a small, dedicated group of individuals to change the world. Margaret Mead said that. Indeed, she said, it is the only thing that ever has. Thanks for letting me be with you tonight. This has really been fun.
Thank you, Doug. I'm going to ask Doug a few questions, and then we're going to open up to the group for questions as well. Now, normally when I have guests here, I have to give them a low or slow pitch, not a low pitch, but a slow pitch, because they have to warm up to the questions. Doug and I, you and I have had some very deep conversations over the years, so I'm just going to start hard.
Okay.
Just go right to it. So I know you can handle it.
Right.
You respect me more because of it.
While you're doing that, I'm going to hand these out.
Okay.
My marketing department's going to hate me.
Doug, if you could make one change that could benefit the world for the better, what would that be?
I think it'd be what I was talking about right there. I would love to see people all over the world get to do what they really want to do. There are a lot of folks who live in other places, Detroit, Michigan, Djibouti, Africa, who don't get the option to pursue their passion, and as a result of that, I don't think that they're probably ever going to do what they do well. They're going to sort of subsistence live. And I think that in places, for example, in Ghana, Africa today, things are working. They've got a democracy. They've got a growing government. Mozambique grew at 15% last year, 20% the year before, because people decided that they were going to fix it, that they were going to let folks thrive. And that's what it's all about.
You have seen a lot in your time. What is something that you've seen or experienced overseas that has broken your heart?
Yeah, there's been a lot of that. Bob Pierce was the guy that started World Vision, and Bob Pierce's famous saying was, "Let my heart be broken by the things that break the heart of God," right? So, yeah, we were in the green famine in Ethiopia with these little kids that, they didn't make it. There's just a whole bunch of too much of that stuff that goes on all over the world, and people stuck in places where they just can't get out right now, and the trauma is hard to watch, because those are human beings the same as me. I've got this rule in my life that everybody in the world likes pizza, right? We may put something else on it. You might like shrimp on yours and I want pepperoni on mine, but we all like pizza. We're not that different. And, these families that are suffering through the stuff, they're not that different than you and me. And the fact that they do is kind of heartbreaking. Yeah.
So this group here represents a cross-section of society, and I'm a believer that there's not the 6 degrees of separation that exist in the world, and a lot of things can be accomplished by people having knowledge of it and then taking action. So how could this group be a resource to you and to Project C.U.R.E? Other than giving you one of my free warehouse buildings or something like that.
I like that. Well, just word of mouth is huge. We were talking the other day about most of our, we've never advertised, and we have more projects coming over the transom right now than what we've ever had in the past, and that's why we're growing. That's why we're adding warehouses and stuff, is to go get more stuff. And the number one place where we get our referrals is word of mouth. People come to Project C.U.R.E. and they have a great time, and
and they want to get the Rotary Club involved, they want to get the church involved, they start picking up the phone and calling their doctor and say, hey, that exam table, when you're done with it, I got this organization. And I think that, that connectedness is a huge piece. We do some events, and we'd love to have you come out. We got an event next Friday, come play. We work hard, we play hard. The casino party that we do, that's next Friday night, is probably the craziest party you're going to go to ever in this town. I think I finally got home last year at like 4:30 in the morning. My mom left at 10. But anyway, to just get involved. That's been part of the mission of what we've tried to do at Project C.U.R.E. is to say, if you want to get involved, everybody gets a seat on the bus. And I'm not sure what the seat is. I get the privilege of driving. I'm not really sure where I'm going, and usually I'm going too fast. But Mario Andretti said that, by the way. He said, if you feel like you're completely in control, you're not going fast enough. So anyway, but it's just this notion that I would like to have everybody have an opportunity to play in this arena. And the notion, let me back up. I'm taking way too long on this question. So we used to think we were in the international healthcare business, right? Because that's what we did. And then we lost the warehouse at Stapleton. Mayor Webb gave it one of those big airplane hangars to us, and then we got evicted. And so I went to see Gene Osborne, who was on my board at the time, and he's another developer guy. And he told me, he said, he's a cowboy. He says, son, he said, for all good you do God and country, he said, you're a trucker. You got to start thinking like a trucking organization. And trucking organizations do this, 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 and this. And so I hired a truck driver guy, the guy that used to run Jerry McMorris's trucking companies, and we started planning our routes, and we started acting like a trucking company, and it took us from here to here. It was the right thing. Then Haiti happened, and I started watching all of these people coming in, and our warehouse was full of people. We moved down here to just on the other side of the Maggianos, right? So it's convenient now, and all these people started coming in, and I would walk down on the warehouse, and I'd say, how come you're here? How'd you hear about Project C.U.R.E.? They said, we gave our money to the Red Cross, and I love the Red Cross. They do really, really good work. But they said that was 2 Fridays ago. And I'm still turning the news on in the morning, and I'm watching this thing, and I want to do something more. I'll keep giving my money, but put me to work. I want to roll up my sleeves and have an experience. And that's when I decided that we're not really in the trucking business either. We are in the bridge building business between there and here. And there's a lot of people who could get involved and change the world in Haiti, but they live in Denver, Colorado, and they will never get on the plane, and they'll never go to Port-au-Prince, and they're never going to speak Creole or French or whatever, but they can still change the world, right? And so we start building those bridges for people to get together, and that has become a passion. And it's just like Southwest Airlines. That's their only mission. How do we get you from here to there, because you're going to go do something fun and meet somebody or have a memorable experience or go to a funeral or something, but you're going for a purpose. Let's get rid of all the barriers that we possibly can so that things don't stand in the way of you getting to do what you really want to do. And in our case, doing what you really want to do is changing the world somewhere. And so we want to just kind of get everybody involved on the bus. And we'll just keep adding seats. You go real slow around the plane.
As I always say, you have the opportunity to give of your time, your talent, or your treasure, and this is an organization that's definitely worthy of that. I would add to that your connections as well. There's a lot of groups out there that have medical supplies, that may have a warehouse, and those supplies are going to good places. As a commercial real estate owner, I see so often that whether it be equipment, when I'm buying a medical building, it's just picked out, thrown up, or in the trash. And it's heartbreaking because it really could go to transform a life somewhere around the world. With that, let's open it up for questions to the group. Yes?
Bill, could you expand or expound on some of the experiences you've had and the types of products you take from here over there?
Yeah.
The question is, can you expand on types of products you've taken from here and put over into these other markets?
So we've done everything from catheters to CAT scans. We don't do very much pharmaceutical because that's just a whole different game, right? You start somebody on a statin, you have to keep them on a statin the rest of their life. So we haven't done much of that. But the crazy thing is the difference between a doctor staying in practice in a town like Nairobi, Kenya, and not staying in practice is whether they have the tools. And the tools might include a decent desk, I've been in places where they've got cinder blocks stacked up on two sides with a piece of plywood. This guy went to school in London. Why would he stay there, right? So we even do office furniture sometimes. We've done entire catheterization labs. We put the first angiographic cath lab in Ethiopia. There's about 15,000 little kids who die from untreated strep throat every year in that country. 85 million people. The average GDP is $100 a year, like 30 cents a day, right? So when these kids get sick, they go to the hospital, but there's no doctor, there's no medication, and so their little fever goes up to about 104, 105, and then they die of mitral valve failure, damages their heart, right? So I met this doctor who had this crazy vision of putting a heart hospital in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and he needed a cath lab. Well, that's like $1.5 million, you know? And so I was speaking to a Rotary Club in Boulder. This guy named Darrell Brown comes up after Rotary and he says, I work for Boulder Community Hospital. We have an angiographic cath lab. We're going to take it out. And I said, awesome. Can I come see it? Cost those people $10,000 extra to take it out, bit by bit, bolt by bolt, but they did. God love those people. And we boxed it up and we shipped it over to Ethiopia and installed it. And we figured that probably we're saving 2,500 of those little kids every year now with that operating theater and stuff. And then Boulder did a really crazy thing. They called us up about a year later and said, you know the other one? We're changing that one out too, so you can have that one. So now there's 2 of them in Addis Ababa saving people's lives. That's pretty sophisticated. The number one reason that people die in Africa right now, you know, George Bush did a lot to fix AIDS and tuberculosis and malaria, and so he's a hero over there. There's like highways named after George W. Bush. People don't like him here, they love him over there. And the number one reason then was AIDS, and you die from tuberculosis or malaria usually. Well, he fixed a lot of that. I mean, it went from like 50% infection rates down to 5. It's unbelievable. The number 2 reason that people are dying in Africa is having babies. And so Hillary Clinton started a program and said, let's stop this problem. And so we've been doing the Saving Mothers Giving Life thing. And it's amazing what a pair of clean gloves and suture does to stop a mom from hemorrhaging, and you can save her life. And a little bulb suction thing to get that gook out of that little baby's nose and mouth, unbelievable. And that thing cost 2 cents. Crazy, right? Yeah.
Nicole?
Could you speak a little bit on the law, the reasons why most clinics will be able to give things to you and why they wouldn't just dump, how they dump them in the trash and whatnot, lawsuits?
For those that couldn't hear, Nicole's question was, can you talk a little bit about the law and how giving these items away actually helps these clinics themselves from not having liability?
Or the paraphrase is, Doug, why aren't you a lawyer still? It's lawyers. We live in this litigious society, right? We get all the beds from Hill-Rom in the United States. So I flew down to Batesville, Indiana. That's where they build Hill-Rom beds. They also make caskets there, right? So either you're going into that community laying down or you're coming out. So you're not standing up. So I'm talking to the folks at Hill-Rom, and I met with the chief legal counsel, and I asked her, I said, do you guys really get sued on used hospital beds? I mean, just between us girls. And she said, Doug, we get sued on brand new hospital beds. She said, I got a lawsuit right now where a guy went in for observation. He was a little bit older. He's laying in the hospital bed, middle of the night, he needs to get up and go use the potty, and he gets out of bed and he slips and he falls. Fractures the femoral artery, and he bleeds out on the floor. Now there's a lawsuit, wrongful death suit, and they sue the hospital. They sue the guys who put the floor in for making the floor too slick. They sue the people that make those stupid little brown socks. They sue Hill-Rom because the bed didn't work to keep that guy in without having to call the nurse's station. They sued the nurse. They sued the nursing company that hired the transport nurse. They sued everybody. And then what they do is they get everybody in a room and they say, you know, this guy was 87 years old, had a heart problem. We figure he's probably worth $2.5 million. What do you put in? And they say, well, I'll throw in $100,000, $250,000. Okay, well, somebody call the widow and ask her if she'll take $500,000 for this case. Let's just be done with it. And that's the way things get done. I was one of those guys, and I can tell you that's what happens. So healthcare companies do not want to have anything to do with lawsuits, and they would rather throw this stuff away than they would take a chance on getting sued. And that's the state of healthcare in America. By the way, not to be political, one of the things that we didn't talk about with the ADA was that problem. Obamacare didn't address that issue because the trial lobby in Washington is too strong and nobody wants to take them on. But that's a big, big problem in this country. Everybody wants to sue everybody else. So that's why this happens.
Yes, Brian?
Thank you for being with us, and I'm glad I got to share my daughter's experience,
Thank
both
you.
as professionals and volunteers. But both shared with me government corruption. Haiti, for example, nothing leaves those docks without government people, payoffs and stuff. How do you navigate working with some of the most corrupt governments on the planet?
So the question is, how do you navigate working with some of the most corrupt governments on the planet?
Well, corruption's pretty universal. My former brother-in-law lost his shirt in a place called Louisiana. So it is part of the human condition, right? Some places, we just decided not to work. Like in Romania, we just won't work there. And until something significantly changes, we won't be back. Haiti is a mess. There's more nonprofits, NGOs in Haiti per capita than any place else in the world, and it is so badly broken, I don't know if they're ever going to fix it. And half that island, by the way, is Dominican Republic. It's not really rich, but it works, right? Nice beaches, you can go there. They've got a system that keeps cranking out jobs and stuff. So there's something fundamentally wrong with the government in Haiti. Kenya's tough. There's a lot of places. Mexico's a hard place for us to work. One of the things, though, is that we decided early on we're not going to play that game. And the reason is if you start, you get the reputation that that's what you are, and you will pay more and more and more and more until you go out of business. And I was just with somebody the other day, and they were telling me about their dad, and he tried to do business, and they wanted all this bribe money, payoff money, and he just sat there for a year and a half, and they finally gave him his license, and that's the last time they asked him for a bribe. So we just won't do it. And and by the way, the other little piece of this is we won't ship until we have that problem resolved. What the trick is they get your container in port, and then they find out that there's some problem with the paperwork, and then they start charging you demurrage at $500 a day, $1,000 a day. And when that gets up to about $65,000, $70,000, and you can't afford it, then they auction it, and their cousin, uncle, brother, whatever, buys it, and the next thing you know, all your stuff is on the black market. And that's how the game is played. So if you don't have the clearance before it ships, you're just asking for a big black eye. Yeah.
So think about that for a second, having $450,000 of product in a container in a country that the potential annual income is $100. There's obviously some challenges there. Other questions? Want to get in the back? Papadilla?
Yes, thank you. My name is Papa from the African Leadership Group. You have spoken about the 3 C's, the pre-work that is done before we send the container. Could you talk a little bit about the container you send and get the medical supply? Is there the follow-up? Because I'm from Africa, I know sometimes to maintain this equipment is the challenge. Could you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yep.
What you got?
So the question was, can I talk a little bit about the follow-up after the container gets there? Because in a lot of places, they don't have the resources, whether that's the human resources or the financial resources to keep that equipment up. Is that a fair paraphrase of your question?
Yes.
Where in Africa are you from?
I'm from Senegal.
Oh yeah, beautiful, beautiful. They have a little road race out there, don't they? Clear to Paris. Part of the thing that we look at that needs assessment is whether or not they do have those people in place and whether they can get the parts. And there's 2 schools of thought. One school of thought is that you need to go in there and you need to educate these people and you need to provide that. If they don't have power, you got to bring the power in. If they don't, right, and you got to teach them, and then you got to provide them all the parts and things like that. The other school of thought is if you can't run an X-ray machine, then don't send the X-ray machine. I come down on the latter, not the former. And part of the reason is because every nonprofit should work to put themselves out of business. And if what I do is I come in and I fix the equipment, and I put the power in, and I provide all of the supplies and the parts and the this and the that, guess what? You're dependent on me to come, and I didn't do anything to change the infrastructure of the system. The other thing that happens is we spend a lot of time trying to teach bright young minds how to fix this stuff. And the next plane out, I'm out on Friday afternoon, and Sunday, so are they. And we just create a brain drain because I just gave them the ticket to have a really good job in Paris fixing equipment, right? So what we do is we look at that and say, if you have an x-ray machine, we'll give you an x-ray machine. If you have an x-ray machine, I probably won't give you a fluoroscope, because that's that whole next level, and I'm not really sure that you could use it. Now, once we get that hospital up and operating, like we did this in Merida, Mexico, when I walked into that hospital, there was 8 people laying on the bed, on the floor in the ER. It was just tough, a bad situation. Today, thanks to DaVita and a project we did with Bridge for Life and all of that stuff, they have a 10-station dialysis, hemodialysis unit. They've got it's not level 1, but it's a good trauma center. All of their neonate works, and now those guys from the Haran hospital are driving clear down to Campeche, and they're donating their time at the next Mexican hospital, and I'm thinking that worked, because we just demonstrated it, we gave them the tools, we helped them to figure it out. If we had gone in there the first day and put those dialysis machines in, I guarantee a third of them would be in somebody's private clinic, the other third wouldn't be working, and who knows where the last third of those things would have ended up, right? But we took it in stages, and it took us about 4 or 5 years to get there, but it works. And those guys by now are really close personal friends. You talk about trust, I know who those people are. I mean, I've been at their house. I went to see their grandkids get delivered at the hospital, you know? So that's that long-term approach, and I don't know that in the United States we do a whole lot with a long-term approach. It's like, I need the deal, I need it now, give me your money, and we're off to the next thing. To do anything that counts and matters, you gotta take a long-term perspective, and they'll get there with the fluoroscope, it's just probably not today, right?
Yes, Armistead?
Talk a little bit, Doug, about your C.U.R.E. kits. What kind of difficulty do you have if you got 10 people going over to get through Kenya, for instance? Obstacles, I guess, is the best way to do it.
The question was, talk a little bit about the C.U.R.E. kits, which I think you should explain what they are in general and some of the obstacles that you have to deal with.
So when I started working with my dad, he would ship like a pallet, he would ship an x-ray machine, he would ship a 40-foot container, he'd ship a 20-foot container. And I went to him one day and I said, you understand we're doing as much work to do a pallet of stuff as we do a 40-foot container. So we're not doing any more pallets, we're just doing 40-foot containers. The next phone call I picked up was from somebody who said, who are you? Your dad used to just let me walk through his warehouse and get stuff. So I realized I had created a solution and I created another problem. And the problem was, what happens with all of these doctors and nurses and church people and medical professionals who go to Haiti for the weekend and they just want a box. They don't want a semi-truck, they want a box. So we created this thing called a C.U.R.E. kit, and it's 50 pounds of medical supplies, and Chase Bank gave us 30,000 money bags. Big ones, canvas ones with a big heavy brass zipper on them. So now we put the C.U.R.E. kit in 2 of those bags, and it works a lot better because it's got handles and checking on its luggage. But anyways, designed to take with you on an airplane, about $2,000 worth of stuff. We were giving those away, and I discovered the truth in America that if it's free, it's worthless, and people would actually leave it at the airport. And I would get a call from United and say, hey, I got another one of your C.U.R.E. kits out here, and because it was free. And they'd get up there to check it on, and they'd say, well, this is going to cost you $100. And I said, heck, it will. I'll just go to Project C.U.R.E. and get another one because they're free, right? So now we say, look, it's $200. You get $2,000 worth of stuff for $200. We'll even mail it to your house. We shipped a bunch of these things to American Samoa because the United States Postal Service delivers in American Samoa. And so we just mailed them to Samoa. It was easier. But anyway, so that's what we do. And we provide all of the documentation and the paperwork and everything. So when you're standing there with that customs agent, they've got the stuff that they need to get that through. I had a guy who bought one of those, took it to Jamaica, the customs agent took it. Well, now he's got $200 skin in the game, and he's mad. And he went clear to the president of Jamaica to get his kit back. And I said, that is success. Now you care as much as I care, right? So that's what we do.
Let's finish up with one last question. Yes, Mike.
Brian and Doug, thanks, Brian, for painting the philanthropy picture. One thing you didn't touch on was the efficiency of nonprofits. And Doug, if I could give you a chance to kind of chat about your overhead rate and your efficiency with Project C.U.R.E.
So Mike's question is, it's great to hear all the stats, but what about the efficiencies of these organizations, specifically Project C.U.R.E.?
Right. So I'm lazy and discovered that if you don't spend money, you don't need to raise money. And so honestly, that had a lot to do with why we do what we do. So if you come to our office, my desk was donated. It came in off a World Vision load, and it looked nicer than the desk I had, so I shipped the desk that I had, and I kept the good one. And it's a pretty nice desk. We paint our own offices. We reupholster chairs. That's what we do. And because of that, our overhead rate is actually less than 2%, which is probably too low, actually. There's an interesting book called Uncharitable, and it's written about this notion that maybe we ought to start judging nonprofits by a different standard. Maybe the question of how much money do you not spend is not the right question. Maybe the question is how much do you do with the money you do spend, right? We're not there as an industry yet. I don't know what you guys do in a Goodwill. That's a tough question, right? Because nobody really knows how to measure effectiveness. How do you measure outcomes? How do you I live like right downtown. I'm 2 blocks from the rescue mission. 5 years ago when I moved down there was a bunch of homeless people. Last night when I walked to dinner, it's the same people. And if what we were measuring was the effectiveness of what we're doing to get people off the streets, we're failing. And Jamie Van Leeuwen is a good friend of mine, and I know he'd probably shoot me for saying that. But we're not measuring effectiveness, and we're not doing a great job of measuring outcomes because a lot of the outcomes aren't there. And so we choose to measure things like how much money do you not spend every year, and we assume that, and I understand the reason is because there's knuckleheads like the guys at United Way that were paying themselves $1 million and flying around on private jets and stuff, and it was wrong. But what we did was we went into a proxy and said, well, let's figure out how good you are by how much money you don't spend. And I don't think that's right. So somewhere, it's going to take some bright minds to sit down and figure this out and say, wait a minute, how do you measure what you do? How fast are you putting yourself out of business? Now, there's an interesting measure. Because if we're really doing a great job, we ought to fix the problem and not the symptom, right? I want to go out of business. I don't want to work at the Haran Hospital in Merida, Mexico anymore. I want them to look at me and say, thanks, we got it from here. And that's happened to us. It's happened in Estonia. It's happened in some other hospitals. That's the right answer, is how do you do that? So, all that to say this, a lot of you sit on boards of nonprofits and stuff. Start thinking about that. Start that hard discussion with your executive directors and your presidents about what do we measure here? Because you always get more of what you measure, right? We know that. So what are we measuring? And how do we measure effectiveness? And how do we, if our mission really is to educate kids, how do we measure what we're doing? And stop measuring this other stuff. I mean, I'm proud of the fact that, Forbes ranks us that way. I'm proud of the fact that we've got a 4-star charity navigator and guide star ranking. That's cool stuff. But I'm not sure that it matters. What does matter is how many lives we saved. That matters a lot, right? Did we change the world? That matters a lot. But we got some more work to do. Anyway, thanks, Brian. Good to see you, man.
It's very powerful. Before I get into the golden nuggets, if you could assemble the business cards, because on my checklist I forgot to do the business card. So at the Opportunity Coalition, we pick a business card, someone comes up for 30 seconds, tells us their name and their company. But I want to go into the golden nuggets, because each speaker shares some great wisdom. And Doug has so many golden nuggets, I'm just going to try to limit a little bit here. First, what are you willing to trade your life for? It's a powerful question. What are you willing to trade your life for? Your greatest strength becomes your weakness. Your greatest weakness becomes your strength. Think about that for a second. Oftentimes we're always trying to avoid our weaknesses. Maybe look at them, maybe embrace them. They may give you a different perspective and a new opportunity. We want to know that it mattered, speaking of our lives, that what we did counted for something. My kids will like this one. Your first bite of pizza tastes better than your last. Kind of like that. I'm the world's biggest capitalist. I love that one. That's kind of near and dear to my heart. I kind of will hug after. Our system works. I would submit it's the most moral system and the one that creates the most benefit for people's lives and opportunity for them to achieve their dreams. And the last one that I'd like to share is people don't work for money. They work for passion and purpose. And I'll add to that if you're not, I'd encourage you to do so. Be transformational. So with that, let's pick a card right quick for somebody, and then we'll get you out of here. I like it when you pick, because I don't want anybody to blame me that I didn't pick their name or something. Oh my goodness. Charlie Babb with Metropolitan Capital Advisors. Welcome Charlie to the front 1 second. Now, Charlie, you have 30 seconds or less, and if you don't, I'm going to ring that bell right there because these people want to get home. So welcome, my friend Charlie.
And what am I going to do?
Just tell us your name and what you do.
Oh, okay, thanks.
You're going to write a big check to Project
I fail
C.U.R.E.
you.
Yeah, no, exactly.
I'm Charlie Babb. I'm with Metropolitan Capital Advisors. We arrange debt and equity for commercial real estate investors, and that's it.
That's perfect.
You
did good. You did good. Thank you, Charlie. Okay, our upcoming schedule, and then we'll get you out of here. On March 19th, we're very pleased to have the Women to Watch in Colorado. It's going to be a Q&A panel headed by Debbie Brown of the Colorado Women's Alliance. If you don't know Debbie, she's doing some amazing things in Colorado, focusing on issues that specifically matter to women and making sure that their voice is heard. She'll have with her Tamara Ward, head of Colorado Concern, and Beth Bolin, who's the Special Projects Director of the Broncos, and Heidi Ganal, who's the founder of Camp Bow Wow. Great organization. April 16th, we have my friend Chris Wright. He's the owner of Liberty Resources, very large company, but he's going to be talking about fracking and energy in Colorado. Instead of just getting educated on the sound bites in some of these, he's the kind of guy that you want to ask the tough questions to, so come back for that one. On May 14th, Susan Morris. If you don't know Susan, she's a fireball. She's from Ireland, and everyone told her there was no oil in Belize. And Susan didn't believe them, and she stuck at it. And when everybody pulled out, she kept at it. And she ended up discovering oil in Belize. But not only did she do that, she's having a transformational impact on their healthcare system through some of the profits that's been generated through that oil that nobody thought existed. And on August 20th, we have Bill Hybl, head of the El Pomar Foundation, head of the U.S. Olympic Committee in his history, and a host of other things. Great individual. If you know of anyone that we should have come as a speaker, please contact me. I also encourage you to check out our podcasts. I get to interview at least 1 to 2 people a week from around the world, people of influence that are doing some amazing things. This week I got to interview Brad Corrigan, head of the band, the indie band Dispatch. Well, Brad's not only that, he took his music career and he brought it down to the dumps in Nicaragua, and they put on concerts to impact the people that are living off the dumps in Nicaragua. Some pretty amazing people. You can get these podcasts on our website. They're free, or you can go to iTunes as well. And in 30 minutes or less on the way to work, you can hear some great conversation by some amazing people that are having a transformational impact. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight, and we hope to see you next time. Thank you.